And anybody who watched the Olympics in Beijing know that they're not fooling around when they set up these huge systemic changes. So, and I'll give you another example. I won't mention the company, but there are several companies in the US that are doing some pilots in China around online learning. And one particular company is doing a pilot on blended models within schools of online teaching and learning. And you know how many teachers are involved in this pilot in K-12 schools in China? Their pilot is 10 million teachers. So when we talk about needing to educate every single one of our kids and take advantage of the best teachers in every single one of our communities, we cannot take the same approaches. There are new delivery models and there are new systems, and we have to help prepare our students. And I won't use the term global competitiveness, but it's an opportunity for global collaboration, both at the college and university level and in the K-12 level. And our kids want it. Our kids want to be globally connected. They know what the world looks like. And this is an exciting, very exciting time. I'll go back and just mention the last country, which I'll mention is Singapore. And Singapore has 100% of their secondary schools using online learning. That is, in the last 5 years, they have trained every single pre-service teacher to fully teach online. They all use a learning management system. They all use digital content. They use it every single day in their face-to-face settings to individualize and customize instruction for every child. And they also have access at home. Why did they start doing this? They started doing it in 2005 as a national strategy. They hold e-learning week once a year, where they physically shut schools down and ensure that students and teachers can teach anytime, any place. They did this because of the SARS outbreaks. They do it as a pandemic preparedness, disaster preparedness. And when the H1N1 virus started breaking out, when they have 2 or 3 or 4 students that need to stay home, that they keep their schools open, and those students stay home. And if the students are infected but well enough to learn, they can continue learning online. The teachers can continue teaching online. There's a whole new model for how the teachers can collaborate and interact with their students, and how the students can interact and collaborate with each other. Contrast that with what's happening in the US, where you have 5 students get sick. Schools are shut down for entire 5 days. You've got all of these kids at home losing learning time. And it's not just happening in Singapore, it's happening in Hong Kong, where they're using e-learning as a continuity of learning strategy. And I just read an article 2 days ago in the Arab nations in Dubai. There's an American school that's using online learning for continuity of learning to avoid school closures. So this is something that's happening very readily in other parts of the country, and I think the US is starting to fall behind a little bit. Although, let me shift now from my global perspective on a summary of online learning activity in the US. How many of you in your states that you live in have a state virtual school? So we have now 35 states that have a state virtual school, and what that does is there's a centralized state-led program that offers individual classes for students anywhere in the state. So kids in rural areas can access classes. Why do we do this? A couple of reasons. 40% of high schools in the United States have no AP classes. In the state of Georgia, give an example, there are 440 high schools, 88 qualified physics teachers teaching in the schools. So we can talk about STEM initiatives and the need for science and math, but when you've got problems with teacher shortages like that, the only way you're going to overcome them is start looking at new delivery models. So the Georgia Virtual School was created to help provide science and math, foreign languages, AP courses to students in areas of high need, in rural areas. They tend to be areas with low incomes and high minority populations. 25 states, so these are the states with state virtual schools, and some of these states are coming along. Oklahoma is working on building a state virtual school, and there's some developments in some of these other states too. Delaware, because of funding cuts, just lost their state virtual school. So we're seeing some changes. A lot of the state virtual schools are funded based on appropriation to hold the districts harmless so that students anywhere in the state can take classes at no cost. In some states like Colorado, they charge tuition dollars in some districts. So there's some really interesting policy issues that you get into, which is one reason I really like working in this field. How do we ensure that we provide a world-class education for every kid when we have a method of doing it through online learning, through technology-enabled education, both in blended learning and in virtual learning for kids that can't access the courses? You start running into the funding issues and the policy issues head-on. You start running into issues if you have major teacher shortages in science and math and other subject areas. For example, if you live in Kentucky, if you're a student in Kentucky, Virginia, or Michigan, their state virtual schools offer a Mandarin Chinese class, co-taught by a teacher in Beijing and students in Beijing. So if you're in a rural area of any of those states, you have access to those courses. But if you're in New York State, you don't have access to a state virtual school or a full-time program. You don't have those options. So it really depends on where you live and what you have access to, and that's all about the policies. These are states that allow full-time statewide online schools. And there are 24 states and the District of Columbia now that allow for statewide online schools. One of my favorite stories, I just met 3 weeks ago. I was out at a conference for education philanthropists in California, and they were talking about the future of learning. And a very young philanthropist opened the conversation up. It was a kid in Florida who was 11 years old. His name was Zach Bonner. And when he was 6, he came outside with his mom and was walking around downtown and saw all these homeless children. And he said to his mom, you know, how is it that these kids don't have any place to live? They don't have any, he got really upset by it. So, and he didn't come from a very wealthy background, but he said, I'm going to go around and raise money. I'm going to do a walk. I'm going to walk to Tallahassee and raise money so I can make backpacks and give food for these kids. So not only did he do that, but he started this foundation called Little Red Wagon, because he started by pulling around carts of water with his little red wagon. He walked to Atlanta, he walked to Washington, D.C., and his foundation, Little Red Wagon Foundation, he's 11 years old, raises money for homeless youth. When he was walking from Atlanta to Washington, D.C., it was in the middle of the school year, and the reporter that was covering the story asked him, Zach, you know, how is it that you're able to do these walks when it's in the middle of the school year? Aren't you missing school? And he said, no, I'm enrolled in a virtual school in Florida, and I get up in the morning and I do my walks in the morning, and in the afternoon and the evening I work on my classes and communicate with my teacher, and I can go at my own pace, and by the way, I'm 2 grade levels ahead of where I would be in my traditional school at home. And so allowing every single child in this country to fulfill their own potential, whether it's wanting to help homeless kids, or whether it's want to accelerate through learning and not being stuck, and seat time, competency-based models are available, but we need to work through the policy issues and the funding issues and the teacher preparation issues to ensure that every teacher is prepared to go into this kind of a model. It's not the 19th century, it's not the 20th century, and if you look at other countries and what they're doing, they are preparing every teacher to be able to have the skills and methodologies to allow for high-quality, competency-based, problem-solving, critical thinking in online learning that is in very few places right now in the United States. The other big issue is about policy and funding. I mean, besides teacher shortages and teacher reciprocity issues, meaning that if you're a doctor or a lawyer and you want to practice, you move from one state to the other, you have reciprocity. Right? So are any of you familiar with like Apex Learning, Advanced Academics, Virtual High School, Florida Virtual School, right? You have a teacher that's licensed, qualified physics teacher. You offer a course. Let's say you have kids from 20 different states in your course. Guess what you have to do? You have to get a certification in all 20 states. There are teachers that work for these